So let's package up this evidence and get it out the door. You got to document it correctly so somebody knows how to put all this stuff back together again. You want to look for the trace evidence, the hidden evidence, all of those pieces that go into this. Again, looking at the potentially protecting evidence on the computer. Remember, if it's a laptop, somebody had to grab a hold of this thing and their fingerprints are going to be on it. It may be that you have to wait for somebody to dust for fingerprints before you take it away. The keyboard is also another great place to have any kind of evidence, especially if it's a separate keyboard. You may even have hair and dust and dirt in there that identifies that person. But remember, they're typing on that keyboard, so more than likely they've got all their fingerprints on it. It would be a great place to pick up evidence. Don't use materials such as plastic bag for packaging. It's really nice to have my bubble wrap to go ahead and protect me, but remember, it's not an evidence bag, so don't use it like it's an evidence bag. Transporting electronic evidence, make sure that you get it there. Don't turn the computer upside down. Store the evidence in a safe area and avoid the conditions of extreme heat, cold, or moisture. You may bubble wrap after you've wrapped it up, but that's not really the important point here. Making sure that you protect it correctly based on evidence, and then go ahead and make sure that you protect it correctly based on the fact that you need to have that you're dealing with a delicate piece of equipment. Maintain the chain of custody all the way through. If you've got to put stuff in an evidence locker that's located with you, look to lock that up. I really like my Pelican case. I think it's a great tool, and I also have a set of keys that I carry on me, and I actually put those keys on a zip string next to my hip if I'm ever out at a scene, so only I have those keys, and then my other copy of those keys is locked in a safe at home. Storing the electronic evidence. Here, at the crime scene, in transportation, and when it gets to the other end. When it gets to the other end, pick it outside of the Pelican case and record all the evidence in your evidence locker. You may even have a large organization that you work with that has their own evidence room, if you will, especially when you're dealing with law enforcement. And remember, when you're putting it in that location, don't just stack it next to the next box. You don't know what's in those other boxes. Give yourself some distance between each one of those boxes. Now let's go back to the bubble wrap just for a second here. One of the things that you can do after you're in the evidence, after your hard drives are in the evidence bag or any magnetic media is in the evidence bag, actually put a wrap of bubble wrap around the outside of it. Why? Well, if I have two hard drives and they're both magnetized differently from each other, and I put them next to each other, the potential for the magnetism of the two drives to affect each other those fields could overlap. But if I put it in a little bit of bubble wrap and I wrap this one up and this one up in different bubble wrap, it's very unlikely that those fields are going to cross-connect at that point and you're going to keep them away from each other. So bubble wrap is a good idea after the fact. Prepare the report of the crime scene. This is not the report that you're going to hand in as evidence to the court as your primary processing of guilt or innocence. This is what was at the crime scene, collected up all this data, because you may be on a large team and you may only be the first responder picking up this evidence. You need to clearly communicate to the people that are going to process the evidence internally how you got this all set up. Try to remove all the opinions from this. Make sure it's just the facts if you can. Okay, here's a quick checklist for first responders. First off, there's a catch-22 here. Should we change the system? Well, wait a minute. We said not to change the system at all. But sometimes when we're talking about volatility, we capture information. If we can capture that volatile information, it may be key to prosecuting this particular individual. It may be that critical evidence that we actually need to make this all happen. Fine. Use the tools that are prescribed by the forensics expert and nothing else, and make sure that anytime you are manipulating or changing the system, that you document very carefully every single thing that you're doing. Keywords and words of list of interest. If you have to go ahead and examine the digital evidence right there and then, and you've got to look at a live system, know what your keywords are that are relevant to this particular crime. Also know what the slang is that goes along with this particular crime. Get some close ties with the legal community. Know your local jurisdiction, all the people that are in your local jurisdiction. Go to a couple of events for your local law enforcement so that you can have your face, see their face at least once or twice. Work with InfraGard or HTCIA to know who those law enforcement people are so that when you show up on the scene, you can turn to somebody and say, I don't remember your name, but we've seen each other before. I'm not somebody who's trying to sneak in here and do something wrong. Preserve your evidence as best as possible. Remember, we're shooting for best evidence. Will take a little bit less than that. Maintaining the chain of custody is critical in the first responder because you've got to get this evidence to the court. Media imaging, it takes some practice and takes some learning. I would definitely, if you want to be a forensics investigator, practice media imaging with all the different tools that you can possibly get your hands on and a couple of different hosts and laptops that are practice for you. I always tell people that the best place to go for practice is to purchase old hard drives off of Craigslist, eBay, any one of the sites that are out there. Pick up those used things and see if you can pull images from them. Once you can pull the image and you can see that it's done, you may even do an investigation at that point in time. If you're doing this with cell phones, go to your local cell phone repair shop where people have abandoned their cell phones and sold them to the cell phone shop and practice there. That gives you a way to get information that you can then say, okay, well, I've worked with these particular tools at this particular time, and it's not new when you show up on the scene. Obviously, after you've captured the image, or if you're using a physical imaging tool, always do the hashing so that you can preserve the integrity of the evidence, because that's all about the authentication. That's your checklist for first responders.